Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another Saturday morning edition of the SPORTSKRIB Fantasy Show. Uh, I see Reggie's down here in the queue. I'll bring him up in a second. Hopefully, we'll be joined by Chris. I haven't heard from him this morning, but maybe he'll be here. Uh, but let's get our little commercial stuff out of the way. As you can see on the bottom here. Wow, got the wrong banner up too. Okay. Uh, Here we go. Okay. Yeah, you can check us out on YouTube. Subscribe and donate. You can see our Cash App right there on the bottom, $ JEK3. All proceeds go to helping us provide prizes for our fantasy league and to keep us here on your YouTube station every Saturday morning. So let's grab Reggie and bring him up here in the queue. How are you doing this morning, Reggie?
Always good, man. Always a pleasure to be with you, talking this fantasy football on a fine Saturday afternoon here.
Yeah. So how's everything going down there in Atlanta? Some places it's freezing, some places it's hot as Hades, and here in California it's just beautiful.
Yeah, I wish I could say the same. It's like in between Atlanta. It's not. I mean, it's chilly. Let's just say that you gotta need a jacket or something. I mean, it's too chilly for me.
All right. Well, so how have things been going for you this fantasy season?
So far, I mean, I guess decent. I'm in so many different leagues, and I'm probably competitive in about roughly half of them, maybe even under half. So one I'm first in. I have a couple where I'm like fourth, a third. In my home league, I'm third. In my home league, I think in our league, I think I'm third-ish. I have to go back and see. I actually have our league pulled up here, but
I think you're third.
I'm doing pretty good.
Right?
In the which league are you talking about? Because in one league I'm 8-4.
Our SPORTSKRIB league.
The SPORTSKRIB league. Okay, so yep. In the SPORTSKRIB league, let me see. So we're split in the East and West there, and me and you are tied for first in that league in the West side, but we're both a game behind Demetrius and Bill on the East side. They're 9-3. We're 8-4.
Okay, well, I told you guys let me win from the 10th pick. I'm gonna be like.
Man, it depends on that 10th pick. If you took Saquon with that 10th pick, because Saquon was going later in drafts this year, man, that pick might end up being a great pick for you, because I had the first pick and I had McCaffrey, and we see how that turned out. So,
yeah. I think we all fell into that for our first pick. If you had that first pick, it was kind of automatic Christian McCaffrey, and now it's like well. We'll see. So let's go back to last week. Well, actually, I want to go back a couple of weeks, because I'm gonna crow a little bit, because you guys kind of laughed at me when I said, like, if you're looking for a late pick, to pick up Juno from the Dolphins.
Oh, Jonnu Smith.
Jonnu, yeah. And everybody laughed. Yeah, well, if you got better choices, but in the last 3 weeks, he's put up 20 points.
Wait a second, though. That that needs some context. I remember context being the key to when we were giving these picks, because we remember this a little bit differently. Because I was actually happy about my commentary on the Jonnu Smith pick. And it was 2 picks I was happy about that week, but he was one of them, because it was, if you're in a league with 10 people, are there 9 better tight ends at the time of the recording? Because now, of course, everybody looks back now, but at the time of the recording, are there 9 tight ends that you probably could pick better from? And I still agreed with that at the time. But I also said that I have a ton of Jonnu Smith in my best ball. I have a ton of
Yeah.
Jonnu Smith in my best ball, so you could do worse than him. I said you could do worse than Jonnu Smith if you're in a crunch and you got to pick a guy up. He's not the worst guy you can pick up, as exhibited by my overrepresentation of him in my best ball. So if I thought he was a bum altogether, I wouldn't have him anywhere, to be honest with you.
No, I do think it's interesting that this is a team in particular where the performance of all of your players absolutely depend upon your quarterback.
Yeah. It's like the team doesn't even work. The team is broken. If he ain't out there, that team is not even broke. It's not even a working team anymore, James.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And yet there are a ton of leagues where Tua is still available. Not because he puts up such great numbers. That's not it, but because he makes the team work.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because I feel like he's underrated. The guy who had him in our league last year won our league last year. He had Tua and Tyreek, and he won with that combination last year. So he can be a winner for you. But I think that because he doesn't have the rushing upside, which is very sexy in fantasy, the guys that have that rushing upside, because that's not really there, I think that he's not as attractive. And you always have the looming injury issue that, anything can happen there.
Yeah. But something that, I was just thinking about it before we came on the air. And it's another thing that I find very unusual about this fantasy season and compared to others. Kickers.
Won me my league. Won me my week to have Boswell. I load up on so much Boswell. And I remember telling you guys that too before. My bad. I didn't mean to interrupt your thought. You can finish your thought.
No. I wanted you to join in there, especially when you have a game like yesterday. When your kicker for the Raiders misses 2 field goals,
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's gonna suck for whoever the Carlson owners are out there.
And we have. I mean, it's not just the Carlson owners. You can look back. There were a couple of games last week that depended upon kickers.
Yeah, Justin Tucker had some issues. Tucker's been missing some kicks. So if you had Justin Tucker thinking that he's going to be that lockdown kicker and you reach for him early, it's not exactly doing it for you.
Yeah, and like I said, usually, some guys, I have some leagues where I don't have a regular kicker. I just pick my kicker from week to week, and and a couple that's come back to bite me in the ass. Like you said, you pick up that number 1 kicker, and all of a sudden he misses, that 27-yard field goal, or the win.
Yeah, Aubrey, same thing. Aubrey missed some of your top kickers missing some kicks, but I would tell you, I've won at least. It's probably been at least 2 weeks that I've won because of Chris Boswell. The Boz has won me at least 2 weeks. And I told you before, when it comes to teams that I like, I try to find places to stick players that I like in my lineup. And Boswell, Najee, Pickens, and Freiermuth too. Those 4 players, and the defense. If you come to defense, that'll be 5. Are always players I'm targeting for my teams because I think they're all fantasy viable.
Yeah, there's some late pickups. Have you had to find some late pickups that you found that actually even though they may have been late pickups and down in as far as rankings are concerned, have you picked up anyone in the last month or so that has been especially helpful?
I would say in the last month or so. Let me think. Well, I tell you, in my league, as much as we're trying to hate on Najee on the show, and I hope that it doesn't come out to bite me this week. I don't have Najee in my lineup this week for the first time in like a month and a half or so. But Najee he was on my bench. He's on our waiver wires. Somebody had dumped him out on the street. I went over there and picked him up, and he has helped me do nothing but win I'm on like a 4-week win streak. That's why I can't tolerate any Najee hate on the show. I feel like Najee has helped me win those games. So he's probably my best pickup the last 4 weeks or so. If I can say any rookies, or not any rookies, like waiver wire type players, I've been rotating. So a few guys have been in and out of my lineup, and I've just gotten really lucky with guys here and there. I think Judy's a good pickup for guys. I had to drop Jared Judy because somebody in my league had dropped Amari Cooper. I'm sorry. Yeah, Amari Cooper. And so I dropped Amari Cooper, or dropped Jared Judy for Amari Cooper, but Jared Judy has proven also to be a pretty good guy if he's available on the waiver wire. Yeah. He shouldn't be now, but a few weeks ago he definitely was in more of my leagues.
Do you think that there's I don't know what the word is. Difficulty with the Amari Cooper fit in Buffalo? I know, I picked him up in a couple leagues, and I think he might be available now because he was hurt last week or the last 2 weeks. But do you think that it's a matter of just the unfamiliarity right now, and that's why he's not putting up the fantasy numbers in Buffalo that he put up in Cleveland?
Well, I think that for one, he has to be healthy. He hasn't played. I don't know. When you look at his sample size, has he played 3 games in Buffalo? I don't even know if it's been 3 games. Like the 3 games is a maybe.
I think it's 2.
Yeah. So like you can't judge anything on a sample size like that. We need to get a sample size of at least, I would need about 10 games and then look at least the last 10 games. I need a decent sample size before I start saying one thing's a trend or another. And 2 to 3 games is just not going to do it for me to make any kind of judgment one way or the other, especially when he's been injured.
Yeah. Now, let me make one thing clear. Now, that was Yahoo Sports hate not necessarily my hate, but
you're not condoning that hate, is what it sounds. That sounds like you have a full throated endorsement of that hate right there. You're saying what's out there.
No, well, there are times when I agree because the one thing that Pittsburgh hasn't had is a consistent running game. We and quarterback play, but we'll kind of talk about those things as we get down the line here. I'm going to bring out my Yahoo hate again, and let's see what we had this week for stardom sit-em. So we'll start with the Chargers at the Falcons. According to Yahoo, we're supposed to start Justin Herbert. Your thoughts?
I think that with these stardom sit-ems, this is gonna have a theme, at least with me on this show when I get asked this question. And this is kind of I don't know if this was the Jonnu Smith episode that we had, but this is a situation where who do you have to start? And what happens for a person like me is you look at these players move into a range, James, more so than just each individual. So they start to move up. So in the beginning of the season, Justin Herbert, you probably had a lot of guys who you would start in front of him. So there was no real reason to start him because he was further down the tier list. As they started to pass, you look at back the last few games and the passing volume has increased there and he's putting up more yards. He becomes more fantasy viable. So he might not move into maybe, if we say start, are we saying average 12 team leagues here? Or are we doing average 10 team leagues here?
Let's do the average 10.
Okay, so average 10, it becomes very competitive, right? Because then now, James, average 10, and this is the same thing with the Jonnu Smith question we had back then and a lot of other questions. You got to think, especially with the quarterback position, more so than the tight end, you can literally have one. You got to be in the top 10, right, James? You got to be in the top 10 quarterbacks. So then what you have to ask yourself when you think about any quarterback starting and whether they should start, is this quarterback a top 10 fantasy quarterback? Not necessarily top 10 quarterback. Is he a top 10 fantasy quarterback? And if you can't say yes about that player, then you're probably not starting him, especially on a week where I'm not sure if we have bye week this week, because all my players seem to be here. I'm not seeing any
Week 14. I know the Ravens are on a bye.
on.
It should be 4 teams on a bye. Week 14. This should be the last bye week.
So we're in week 13 now. So what is week 13? Does week 13 have any players on bye?
Let me look here at
I got a ton of players on bye next week, man. It's bye apocalypse for me next week, man.
Okay, let's see. Running up the schedule here. Week 13. I don't see anyone on the bye.
I know all my players are available. I know all my opponents' players are available. So I knew that was kind of uncommon, to have to try to, because I'm thinking then, so you factor in the bye weeks, that's where you kind of go, that's where these players really become important, because a guy who might not necessarily be a top 10 fantasy quarterback, you might actually be in play because he's your quarterback is on bye. Now, what happens is those players like Justin Herbert, like I told you before, in the beginning of the season, they're not really viable, not even for a streaming purpose. But now I think he is viable for a streaming purpose. I think that's not crazy. So what I view start sit questions like that in that context, and I do think that he is startable because the passing volume is there now, and he seems to be slinging it around out there. So I would start him if you got to.
Let's see. Who else do I have here? Oh, of course, Steelers at the Bengals. Start Pickens. This I think is a no-brainer. Even though I have in the last 2 weeks I've had a couple problems with Pickens, some of his remarks, but it's he's a must start if you have him on your team. I mean, like you said, coming down to these last few weeks, even though he hasn't put up the touchdowns, he does have 776 yards receiving.
Right.
He averages about 71 yards a game, and he has had, I think, 84 targets, and he's had 52 receptions. But
right.
So if you have Pickens, it would seem to me, especially when you're coming down to the top 10. But then again, this is another one of those that depends upon your quarterback.
Yeah, for sure. And also Pickens, I feel like, has been a startable guy, whether it was Russell out there or whether it was Justin Fields, because he's going to get a lot of volume one way or the other because he's the only game in town. And I just think that he's starting to come on as the year is gone, but he goes from a decent start to a must start. But I always felt like the start part was there for him. You know what I mean? I never felt like I felt comfortable putting him on my bench unless I just had much better options.
Yeah. I had in the Cleveland game, I did have a couple issues. First of all, I mean, you play in Pittsburgh and you're complaining about the snow. Really? I mean, come on. Yeah.
Where is the game in Pittsburgh this week?
This game. No, they're on the road. They're playing at Cincinnati.
Okay. Is there snow?
Well, who knows? It's Ohio.
So it could be snow.
And
The chances of snow should not be shocking for you, is what you're saying.
well, you play for the Steelers. You don't. There's no snow in Pittsburgh. Really? I mean, it would be different if you played, maybe for the 49ers or, the Tampa Bay
like
Buccaneers.
Miami, right? You team like Miami out there slushing around.
I mean, you play in Pittsburgh and you're complaining about the snow in Cleveland, please. And then I did get a little laugh when the cornerback from the Clowns put up fake tough guy on his Twitter. But as you say, I mean, regardless of that, it's not like I'm going to drop him, So let's see the next game here. The Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now the Jaguars are coming off of their bye week, but according to Yahoo, you sit Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby.
Wow. I mean, maybe. I mean, Travis Etienne it's who do you have starting to sit him? But I do have a few teams where he's sittable now. He used to be that must-start guy, kind of the opposite of the George Pickens that we were just talking about. We were talking about maybe a certain degrees of start, a must-start to a decent start, or okay start, a decent start, must-start. If we're talking about the degrees there, I feel like the start part whereas it was there for Pickens, I don't feel like it's necessarily there for ETN. I don't think he's a must-start. You know what I mean? I feel like he's okay. If you got to start him, that's fine. But you probably got better options. So it's unfortunate. And it's funny because the Jags, they didn't play last week. I don't even know if anybody noticed. A team like the Ravens. So the Ravens next week, they're going to be missing. And in fantasy, they're going to notice. They're going to notice that the Ravens are not playing next week. The Jags didn't play last week. You probably weren't starting almost any Jag anyway. So it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter to you.
Yeah, if your team depends upon starters from the Jaguars, you might be on.
You got Evan Ingram over there, man, and then that's it, right? That's that. After Evan Ingram, it gets very shady from there on down.
Everyone else is hurt. Both their wide receivers are out for the year.
Christian Kirk is out for the year for sure.
Yeah, and the other guy just went down too, right? One has a collarbone. That's one we just Kirk. So he was out for the rest of the year, and now they've lost their other one.
Unfortunate.
Arizona at the Vikings. Now, this one, it doesn't really say the start or sit, but what it says is to temper your expectations for James Conner, Kyler Murray, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Now, Conner just signed an extension. I think I just saw it on the headlines. He just got, 3 years, $31 million, something like that.
Well deserved. I think he's earned that.
Yeah. But Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't think has lived up to the fantasy expectations that we all thought. He's had, I think, maybe 2 breakout games, if you want to call them that.
For sure. Not the season that was expected up to this point for the lofty expectations they had for him.
But on the other hand, when you look at the numbers here for Kyler Murray, 2,343 yards passing, averaging 213 yards per game, 68.7 completion rate, 12 TDs, and a quarterback rating of 98. And when you look at Connor's numbers, Connor's is another one of those quiet backs. I kind of wonder what would have happened if he had been able to stay in Pittsburgh. But what's your thoughts here? Let's see. It says I think Connor has had 48% of the runs. Carry over the
Must
last
start
three
for sure.
games. You know,
Mhm.
Trey Benson has had a pretty good share along the same 3 weeks. But the Vikings have allowed only 62.3 rushing yards per game. Uh,
Yes,
that's
excellent
among,
defense.
yeah, that's among the top five. What's your thoughts here? Connor's big bonus against that Vikings defense.
I feel like the tempering expectations is kind of what you do in games like this. You got to play your guys. So for one, you can't be scared to play your guys. I think in fantasy, one of the things I've heard before, and I'll say it on the show time and time again, is to start your studs. I hear that in fantasy a lot. Start your studs. So that means if you have a guy, let's say you got Saquon, he's going up against the best defense, the run defense. Doesn't matter. You got to play him. And I feel the same way about the James Connors of the world. You got to play him. There's no world in which I'm going to sit him, not unless I happen to have an abundance of running backs, and then I can kind of choose matchups at that point, which is kind of what's happening to me now as I get into a world where Pacheco has come back. So now I have Pacheco, McCaffrey, Tyrone Tracy, and Najee. Now I'm starting to have to make choices with where I put my running backs versus if I didn't have those choices. And if I had a choice like that, maybe then I can think about not starting John Connor if I have or James Conner if I have a better situation. But I don't know. It would take a lot for me to sit him.
Yeah, Cardinals signed Connor to a 2-year extension. Uh, let's see. How did it break down?
I don't think I can sit him or Harrison Jr. to be honest with you. I'm not comfortable sitting Harrison Jr., but I'd sit Harrison Jr. before I would sit James Conner.
Yeah, you definitely, for consistency's sake, you would have to start Connor. But yeah, he let's see.
Hope my guy McBride keeps putting up too. He's the only card I think I have on my home team is McBride.
Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
he's been producing for me, man.
so let's see. Where are we at here? Cardinals, Minnesota. Um,
Stout
okay.
defense over there in Minnesota.
Uh, the Colts at the Patriots. Uh, this was another guy we kind of mentioned, but it was another guy. Like if you're having to go this far down to pick him up, how good is your team to begin with? But I'm talking about Odinai Mitchell, the guy for the Colts.
That's the Colts, man.
Yeah,
I like them coming out of Texas. Adonai Mitchell coming out of wide receiver that came out of Texas, if I'm not mistaken. I had high hopes for him coming out. Maybe some of these wide receivers you have high hopes for. At least I will say I do certain years, and I get there like a year too early. They have the year I think they're going to have a year later. So maybe he'll be one of those wide receivers. But I mean, if you are, that's pretty far, James. I mean, that's far. If you got to start Adonai Mitchell, are you starting him on any of your teams? I'm already going to answer that for you. I'm going to say no.
I don't even have it. I think I might if on two teams I'm lucky, but I don't.
Even on your bench, even is he even rostered on your
no,
teams? Forget
no,
started. I know he ain't started, but he's.
no. Here's a very interesting one because I don't know what Jets defense I'm going to get. But Seattle is coming east to play the Jets. Seattle is another one of those teams that doesn't necessarily travel well, but I have the experts here at Yahoo telling me to sit Geno Smith.
I mean, I don't want to have to start him. I mean, that's true in that sense. Kind of going into the top 10 sense. If we're talking about a 10-team fantasy league, do you think that is depending on how your quarterback? Because I have seen quarterback scoring where Geno is just lighting it up in certain leagues where quarterback scoring is different. So you got to definitely check the scoring of your league. But if you don't have a league like that, if you have a typical Yahoo's fantasy scoring league, I don't know if Geno's in the top 10 quarterbacks, especially on a week like this week. I feel like you're going to have a lot better options. I do think that on a week like this week, I view Geno as like a streaming quarterback range for that guy. So if you got a guy, say a streaming quarterback range, that really kind of implies that you have another guy that's waiting in the wings. Maybe he's injured, maybe he's on bye, or other guy you're waiting to come back to replace the guy you got. And I kind of view Geno in that range. So this could be a question almost every week for Geno Smith.
Okay, now, depending upon what you expected at the beginning of the season, the Titans at the Commanders start.
Yeah, of course. I'm starting them. Yeah, for sure. We had this question back, I think, on the Jonnu Smith questions. Is who's at the start then? Like for same kind of situation, except higher up on the list. So some of these guys move down, some of these guys move up. And I remember saying when we did have the Jonnu Smith situation, one of the reasons that you do like a Jonnu Smith was his quarterback is good. So what you start to go to is, even if you don't think a guy is getting the targets and you're looking on your waiver list and you don't have a guy that you like more as a player overall, you kind of take that guy off. And then you got a guy who may not be getting the targets you like overall, and you kind of scratch that guy off the list because those people aren't available. You continue to go down. Now you have the group of guys who may not have those first two numbers, may not be the man, may not have the targets, but is playing in a decent offense. And that's like a Rashard Bateman on the wide receiver side. You might have a guy that is, well, here's a guy that's at least playing in an offense where the quarterback likes to throw the ball, and he's going to have at least some opportunities in that aspect because they score points. And I believe that to be the case here with Tony Pollard, because he's getting opportunities there in Tennessee. So unless you got a guy on your roster who's getting the same opportunity, he's got like lead back opportunities. And you got to check Taji Spears' injury situation. He went off here last week. So I don't think Taji Spears was out there last week.
No. The Buccaneers at the Panthers start Bucky Irving.
Yeah, man. How do you sit him after last week? I think you got to start. I mean, I would start him. And if I had to start Rashard White, I would start Rashard White too. I wouldn't. I never liked that situation, that two-back situation. It's not something I like. I think it's the bane of any fantasy guy's existence. But as we see, there's just fewer and fewer of these one-back situations. That's why Saquon Barkley is so valuable. You know, you don't have a lot of situations like that. Even with Bijan, you got Algier. McCaffrey is underperforming, but I at least can say that he is at least taking bell cow role there. You want a bell cow type back, and there's just not a lot of them. So I could see starting Bucky because of what he's been doing the past few weeks. But if you're in a crunch and have to start a guy who has a chance of getting into the end zone, Rashard White's not killing you there. And you probably drafted him earlier because I think that he was going earlier in draft season than Bucky was.
And don't forget, we have Mike Evans back also.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's exciting. I don't think that really cuts into Bucky's. Maybe more cuts into Rashard. I think Rashard is more the pass catching back, but if you're Bucky, still wheels up there for you.
Yeah. The Rams at the Saints start Matthew Stafford.
Rams at the Saints. Yeah. I mean, Matthew Stafford.
He's got both his weapons back. He's got Cooper Kupp back. He's got Nakua's back. He's got Williams is running decent. What are you thinking?
Remember when I said that with the streaming quarterbacks, Geno Smith just about three. If we're going to call back to about 3 minutes ago, I was saying that with Geno Smith, he's always in this conversation. Matthew Stafford is a player that's in this conversation, but multiply it times years. Matthew Stafford has been years occupied himself as either the top 10 fantasy quarterback who's definitely already starting on your fantasy team, or the guy that you would pick up off the first guy, him and the Jared Goffs of the world, the first guys, the guys you look to pick up off that waiver if you got a streamer quarterback for any reason. And he perpetually stays on those lists because he likes to throw the ball. So Matt Stafford, of course, is always straddling the start, sit, fence. I think that's maybe going to be the same. If he plays for another 2 or 3 years, I think it'll be the same until he's out of the league. He'll be on the maybe start list.
Right now, he has 2,800 yards passing. He's averaging 254.5 yards per game. His completion rate is over 66%, almost 67. 15 TDs.
How many interceptions did it say?
I didn't see how many interceptions.
15 TDs. I mean, it's. I think those are startable. Those are startable numbers, right? If you get a guy that you strap, that's what really all you really want from a guy.
Seven interceptions.
So 15-7. That's not bad at all. I think you get a guy like that, and he is giving you production like that, and he's on the start, sit, fence. You know, maybe if you're looking for top 5 quarterback numbers, that doesn't do it for you. But if you're looking for, hey, I'm gonna pick this guy up and maybe have him as my second quarterback if I roster 2 quarterbacks, my perfect second quarterback guy. Or if we have bye weeks, first guy off the waiver wires. So he's always straddling that fence. No surprise that he would be on the start list here.
And what I think might be the game of the week, we had the Eagles visiting the Ratbirds. Starred Dallas Goedert. Goddard's been kind of underperforming. He's been hurt much of the season. Right now, he has 406 yards receiving, averages about 50 yards per game, 35 receptions, only 1 TD. But out of those, he's been targeted 42 times, and he has 35 receptions out of 42 targets.
I feel like you have to. I mean, I think that's top 10, right? I have to go look at our numbers and see. I feel like that's you got to be able to name. If you got to be able to name 9 guys better, right? In an example that we have here, and I feel like this is especially true for tight ends, because when we have these conversations about quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, a lot of guys might be rostering multiple of those positions. You don't really come across a lot of guys rostering 2, 3 tight ends. You know what I mean? So a lot of times those guys are available. So I don't know at this point in time, at this point in the season, if you can name 9 tight ends better than Dallas Goedert. I feel like maybe you can get through the first 5-ish or so pretty easy. Your Brock Bowers, McBrides of the world. You could rattle off that, but after you get through those first 5, 6, start to get questionable. It's gonna start to get questionable. You know what I mean? And I feel like Goddard is in that. Maybe Goddard gets that number out to 7, 8. You know what I mean? But I don't think you can get to 10 without having Goddard in there.
The 49ers at the Buffalo Bills. Sit Deebo Samuels.
That's hard to do, right? No, like I'm not ever sitting Deebo Samuels. No. If I say Deebo, it's because of a plethora of weapons. And I do have some leagues where it looks like Deebo is not the best start out of his tier of wide receivers. So if you're blessed to have multiple wide receivers at this point in the season, to have multiple wide receivers in the same tier as Deebo, and you're looking at that and you're saying, okay, well, out of all these wide receivers, I'll sit Deebo. That's fine. But let's say you're in a 3 wide receiver league, like my home league is 3 wide receivers, and that means I can start 4 on the flex. I might get to 2 to 3 pretty easy, but that 3 to 4 is not always easy to get to. So that means you got to have that 3 to 4 filled out without having Deebo in there, and that's hard for a lot of lineups to get to that number of wide receivers and not have a Deebo in there.
The Clowns at Denver.
And wait a second, dude. That's with Purdy playing. Let's not get it twisted. That goes because I hear Purdy's playing this week is what I hear. That's what I
Right
heard.
now, it hasn't been set in stone, but they are looking to get Purdy back.
Yeah, it all changes. Of course, you sit Debo if Purdy doesn't play. You saw what happened out there last week. It was disaster. So you sit him if Purdy doesn't play. If Purdy plays, then I'm gonna keep him out there.
Okay, as I was saying, the Clowns are playing the Broncos. Air is a little thinner, but it could be just as much snow in Denver as it was in Cleveland or more. But sit Nick Chubb.
I'm not sitting him, but I can see why, because I have Denver's defense, and that's been an amazing pickup for me in my home league. They've been destroying teams this year. So I'm a fan of Denver's defense, but I don't know if I could sit Nick Chubb. I mean, life's gonna be pretty good for you to sit Nick Chubb, but he hasn't been the runaway league-winning Nick Chubb that we've come accustomed to. So it's not as unthinkable as it used to be.
Well, let's talking about that defense. They've allowed the second fewest rushing yards before contact, and the third fewest rushing scores, only 6.
They don't play games, man. That defense is stout.
Chubb only ran 8 routes last week, and the Denver has conceded the 4th fewest rushing fantasy points to running backs in the last 5 games. And don't forget the Browns do have issues at left tackle. So,
yeah, I it'll take me a lot to sit Nick Chubb, but he's not a must start, man. He unfortunately that tier of starts, he's not. I think he's moved to a tier below that right now. He hasn't shown that he's in that same tier as Saquon's, Mixon's of the world. You know, those guys where you don't even think about it. You know, where Chubb used to occupy that rarefied air where he was I don't even think about I'm starting Nick Chubb guy to now. Am I starting Nick Chubb? And that's it's crazy, but that's the world we're at right now.
Here's a guy that I I think he has mixed reviews, but I think he's another guy that's been below expectations this year, kind of like maybe not as much as Marvin Harrison, but when you consider the team that he's on, that might have a lot to do with it too. But Yahoo also considers Brian Thomas Jr. a must start against Houston.
Okay. I mean, I can see that. When we were talking about the Jags and we were talking about people that you may start, I would put Brian Thomas Jr., I put him on that list with Evan Ingram. I probably have Evan Ingram a start above him, but they're kind of 1-1A to be honest with you, because those are literally the only. Then probably would be Etienne after that. Then maybe Lawrence after that. Like Lawrence probably be the last guy I would have in that list. But I like the other guys. I mean, I like Brian Thomas. Like I have no problem with that whatsoever. It's Trevor Lawrence could be questionable, but I feel like Brian Thomas in the tier of wide receiver he's in. If you're looking at just pure performance right now, you probably have guys better than him right now. But he's not a guy you start where I'm just absolutely worried about it. But unfortunately, the Jags just they're not killing it fantasy wise. So I can see why there'd be some concern.
Here's a little bonus. It says stash this running back for fantasy football playoffs. And the back that they're talking about is Trey Benson.
Wow. Are they expecting Connor to get injured? Is that what they're saying? What is this? What's the strategy there? Because that's what would have to happen for me to get him out there.
Well, let's see. Right now, they're saying that he's rostered on about 24% of the roster. It says what makes him a stash is that see Arizona take on the Patriots, the Panthers, and the Rams in the fantasy football season so far. The
So they're trying to
Patriots,
say the favorable matchups. Is that what they're getting
yeah,
at here?
yes, this is
I
what
mean,
they're
he's
talking.
got to be playing to have favorable. I mean, I get it. I get favorable matchups, but the key to any stashing situation, no matter how premium the cuff the back is, you got to have a roster spot to where you could do this, because otherwise you're only hoping on injury, right? You're hoping on injury. James, you need James Conner to get injured. Without him, there's no. Who cares about the schedule? Like, you're skipping one major thing that has to happen in order for that to really matter.
Okay, another guy that you're talking about picking up here, and I like this pickup here because I'm not really sold on Eckler, but Jeremy McNichols.
I mean, if is Brian Robinson hurt?
Well, right now you have Eckler in concussion protocol,
Okay.
so that would leave McNichols would be the last running back other than
So he would move up to the 2 spot where
yes,
Eckler was at. Then, so Eckler.
yes.
I think maybe for a streaming spot, but I don't think that Washington feels the same way about Eckler that you feel. So I feel like when Eckler comes back, James, he's gonna leapfrog me right back into that number 2 spot. So be wary of that. The guy that you're picking up may be a rental. And you gotta think about it like this too. You're renting a second guy. You're not even renting the first guy. You're renting the backup guy. So you're renting the replacement tire, and you're trying to the backup to the replacement tire. We're getting deep into the weeds here, but I'm just saying, like, unless Brian Robinson needs to be hurt for this to be interesting. But if you don't, if in these kind of offenses, because we saw this with Mostert and A-Chan last year, and we see it now with Montgomery and Gibbs, you can definitely have 2 guys, in offenses like this, and they don't necessarily look like they play the same style. I like the style contrast better with Eckler because I think he's a certified pass catching back. But you need to look at the injury here, because I'm not interested with Eckler here. If Eckler comes back, this guy's going to be the 3rd running back.
What about Scary Terry?
Love him, man. Of course, you're starting Scary Terry. Absolutely. Because I have Jaden Daniels in my home league, doing good things. I tried to get Scary Terry very early in this league. I really wish I had pulled the trigger on. I was kind of more wary about it because he wasn't really doing great the first few weeks, but I did make a play, and it's interesting to see now how that would have worked out if I had both of them on my team. I was on the right path there. I wasn't able to make that trade happen,
though. We were talking about Amari Cooper, but right now it seems like the man in Buffalo is Shakur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's as it should be, because Khalil Shakur's been there the entire time. He catches the ball. I think he's got one of the highest catch rates. I got to go back and see if that's still the case now. But most of the time you throw the ball in his direction, he's catching the ball. So that's about all you can ask the man to do. Right? So Cooper's only been there a few games, been injured one of those games. There's no way in the world he should just come in and all of a sudden be the man, no matter how good we think he is. I think Shakur has earned being the man here, and definitely one of the first guys I would start, because Keon Coleman, I haven't checked his injury situation to see if he's running out there. Cooper, Shakur, Curtis Samuel, I guess if you're in a desperate spot. I got to see what's going on with Dalton Kincaid too. These are things you're kind of look at there, but Shakur, I'll be running him out there every week, to be honest with you, if I had him on my rosters.
Okay, I'm going to go off subject but on subject, because I don't I don't think we could talk fantasy without talking about what happened to the Bears this week.
Oh man, yeah, man.
And of course, Eberflus is fired.
Long overdue, right there.
I think we've been talking about Eberflus being fired for the last 2 seasons, at least. But how does this affect that Chicago team? I mean, you got the the consensus number one pick, Caleb Williams. Uh, there, doing the best job that he can, considering what he has to work with. I think they need to. There's a lot more help that they need to give him besides
Right.
an offensive line. But how does this? First of all, you've got an interim coach, and usually like when you have an interim coach, you don't know whether he's an interim for this season or whether he's an interim with a possibility of taking over the head coaching job.
Right.
I don't see him taking over the head coaching job because there are a lot of names out there, and there's some pretty good assistant coaches out there. But how do you think that this uh, affects a team? Uh, because I don't think that the Bears have ever fired a coach during the season before. And like I said, you've got a bunch of young guys there. You got a young quarterback, and he doesn't really know, what direction the team is going to go in next season.
Right. Right. Right.
So, what do you think? Does this take away the fantasy value for all of the Bears players?
I thought the fantasy value for the Bears players has been up and down all season. If you've hung on to the Bears players through week 13 or 14 or whatever week they're going to be going into, then why would you not hang on to them now? I mean, it's been an up and you've already been used to this turbulence that is hanging on to any Bears players as has been throughout the season. So there's that. From the general scheme of things, you're talking about just from the sports implications, I think that it can do nothing but help Caleb Williams. Just get it over with. Fortunately, you haven't even dealt with a full season of games with this guy, with this organization. It's not like you had to learn an offense that you had been in and you were just starting to get the hang of it. You've been spending 2 to 3 years in it. You're just starting to get it. And then now it's ripped out from under you. No, let's rip the Band-Aid off now. Let's get it over with. People felt like he was a disaster going into the season. We might as well get confirmation of him being a disaster in the very first season or very early on. Let's look at this team very early on and say, okay, well, let's go ahead and get you up out of here and have a complete clean house and see what happens here from a coaching standpoint. And I agree with you, too, from the interim situation. And when you have an interim coach take over very early in the season, James, I think that it makes more sense that coach might have an opportunity to earn the confidence of the owner, confidence of the fans, confidence of the players. At this point in the season, what are we, week 14? There's about, 4 to 5 games left in the season? Even if you go 4-1, is that really going to convince everybody that you're the next guy? You can go 5-0 maybe. If he goes 5-0, Caleb throws for over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns per game. He's just out there lighting it up. Then maybe you start to look at that guy, right? If the team just looks markedly better and they're just ripping people, they turn into the Lions all of a sudden overnight with this guy. The last 5 games, I think that's what it would take for him to actually stay around and have his name in there, be competitive with the big name coaches. But might as well get it over with from an organization standpoint. This is what we all thought, kind of with like the Daniel Jones situation, right? It's what we all thought going in. Let's just get it over with.
Well, I wish you had Mr. Scott here. I'd like to know what he thinks about the Vikings picking up Daniel Jones.
Hilarious. Hilarious.
All right, let's get into some picks here, and let's see. I'm gonna start. Let's start with our league.
Yeah.
So right now, I have a lead on my opponent. Right now, I'm beating my opponent 55.3 to 15.3. But I've used, let's see, Rico got me 21, over 21 points. Laporta got me 15 and a half. Montgomery got me 15.5. Unfortunately, the Chiefs didn't do me any favors, but I did get 3 points from them. Let's see, players that are on my bench that I could have used would have been DeAndre Swift, Jameson Williams, or Raheem Mostert. So I basically got all the points that I could get out of my starters. But the rest of my team goes. Lamar Jackson is my quarterback. James Conner is my RB1. A.J. Brown is my my wide receiver 1. DK Metcalf is my wide receiver 2. And and then I have Justin Tucker as my kicker. Now I do have some alternatives here. I could start Josh Allen over
That's interesting.
Lamar Jackson. I could start Jawan Jennings as one of my wide receivers, or Michael Pittman Jr. As my other wide receiver.
I feel like I like the wide receivers you already have versus those wide receivers.
Yeah. So that's my lineup for the rest of the week. How are you sitting in the sports crib? I don't know who you're playing.
In the Sports Crib League, it looks like I am playing Team Kendrick. Team Kendrick is who I'm playing in the Sports Crib League. I have a start sit there situation where I'm going to either start Jaden Daniels or Hurts. Am I starting Hurts? Am I starting Daniels? So Hurts was in the lineup originally. I took him out and put Daniels in because I like Hurts is going against Baltimore, whereas Daniels is going against Tennessee. So I like the matchup better. So right now I'm starting Jaden Daniels, but that can go back and forth. RB1, which is kind of RB1 1A. I have 2 good running backs in this league. I have Kyron Williams and Achane, which Achane came through for me. But I got Kyron Williams and Achane. Wide receiver 1 is St. Brown. I got St. Brown and Jackson Smith and Jigba here. On the bench, I have Amari Cooper and Tank Dell on the bench and Deebo Samuel. We were talking about the benching situation. Remember we were talking about having Deebo Samuel on the bench? This is kind of situation that we kind of referenced there. Like if you got better options here, and as we get to the flex, you will see I have a better option. But right now, JSN has a pretty much hot hand there in Seattle's come through for me. So I've been starting him versus Deebo and St. Brown. Kate Otten in the tight end spot there. Tyron Tracy was my flex. That's why Debo's on the bench. Got Houston as my defense and Boswell as my kicker. I got Boswell, man. I got Boswell in like 4 leagues, man. Anytime I can get a Steeler that's remotely going to put up, but as exhibited by Boswell and Harris, if I get a Steeler that's remotely going to put up points, they will be on my team.
All right. We're both 8-4 here, right? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Man. Yeah, at least we're winning. At least we're not coming on here just talking out of my behind here, man. Crushed in leagues. At least we're winning leagues here.
All right. Well, hey, man. It's funny how fast this hour goes.
Yeah, man.
Why don't you give us your final thoughts for the week? I have to go grab something right quick.
Final thoughts would be: hopefully you are going into this end of the season here with winning hopes here. For people like me who are kind of sitting decent, we can kind of move into that first spot. I'm kind of sweating it out here from a seeding standpoint, but I think at least I'm going to get into the playoffs here, so I can at least watch the games here from a stress-free standpoint from that aspect, and hope that sending good luck vibes to people out here who are going to be sweating it out the next few weeks here, hoping to get into the playoffs, as I am in a couple of my leagues. I have a few no sweat games and a couple leagues going to be sweating it out here. I could kill more time if you want me to, just talking about random stuff if you want me to here, James.
Yeah, just go ahead for a minute. I'm trying to get my order in here.
So another thing too, then, and while we're here, is as we go into the end of the season, we can't get discouraged about the next season. As we go into the end of the season, it's easy for people to think, wow, if I ever played this game is ruining my life, as I have often thought in many seasons before. But one thing to remember is there's always next season, and also too with DFS now being a thing. Even if our fantasy season is over, you could always go play DFS, so you don't have to just go sit at the house all sad. So remember, as if you're eliminated, as I am, and a few of there's a couple of my leagues, James, where I'm just out the game altogether, man. I'm just I'm like 10th, 9th in a couple of those, and just doing absolutely nothing. So if you're that guy and you only have one league, I can see how it get discouraging. But there's always next year, and there's always DFS. So hope springs eternals, ladies and gents, and I will see you next week.
All right, man. You have a good one. We'll be back on there Wednesday with the Sports Crib, and I look forward to talking to you and Hawk next Saturday right here on the Fantasy Show.
All right, see you next time, guys.
Have a good one, guy.
All right.